the fabrics that we love to wear is knit, t-shirts, sweatshirts, that wonderful non-stable fabric that stretches it because it feels good. Whenever I look around in my seminars, I see that 90% of us are always wearing something stretchy. So how do we stabilize a knit for embroidery? Another fabric that falls into that category is the new moisture wicking fabrics that are used so often on like golf shirts and tennis shirts and that type thing. Applique knit, a sweater knit. These are all considered unstable fabrics because of the way that they're constructed. The needle can actually cut into the fiber. And these fabrics give you no help at all when you are embroidering. So we cannot use a tearaway on these fabrics. We have to use a cutaway. Why? So many people ask me that, what's the difference between a tearaway and a cutaway, besides one tears away and one cuts away? So the tearaways are made of little short fibers which allow them to tear very easily. Cutaways are made of elongated fibers, so the stitch will actually wrap around and elongate in that fiber. So very, very important for stabilization to use that. And a great test that you might want to do, this kind of, as my grandmother used to say, it's proof in the pudding. This is a great sample that I did, and not sure the camera can pick it up, but there is a noticeable difference. One side is done with tearaway and the other side is done with cutaway. You can look at it, I can look at it and easily see the difference. Obviously this one is our cutaway, and then this is our tearaway. You'll see some bowl sewing is what I call it, distortion in the letters. Those are all signs that I accidentally used a tearaway, but obviously on purpose to show you the difference in this particular sample. Very, very different. But where you really see the difference is once the garment is washed. And if you're like me, the majority of the embroidery I do is for somebody else. I very rarely embroider for myself. So if you're embroidering something for someone else, you want it to look really nice when it comes out of the washing machine and dryer. You know, even if it's a baby onesie, t-shirt, sweatshirt, a sweater, anything like that, we want this to look its very best when we give it at the baby shower, but we also want it to look good after that new mom washes it. And we certainly don't want her having to iron the baby onesie just so the baby can wear it. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is what stabilizers do we need to be using for knits and how to properly use them. So I'm going to set this aside and we're going to get started. So my favorite cutaway is our Floriani no-show mesh. Floriani no-show mesh is super lightweight, and it comes in 3 colors. It comes in beige, and it comes in white, and it comes in black. So all 3 colors. Now all 3 of these colors also come in fusible and non-fusible. So here I go again talking about fusibles. Fusibles are the best. That makes you the best embroiderer you can be. Why? Because it gets that fabric in control. No matter if you're sticking the piece down or if you're hooping it, please use your fusible cutaway. Again, the fusible is temporary, so that's number 1. It's not going to be in there for always. It's just a temporary hold to keep that fabric from stretching. This is a very, very light knit, which stretches like crazy, as you can see on the outside. But once I fused my no-show nylon mesh onto the back, it does not move at all. So very easy to hoop. Or if I want to stick it down, the fabric is prepped correctly, so I can now stick this down. So either method is totally acceptable. So again, when you are fusing your no-show mesh, your fusible no-show mesh, onto the back of your knit, the same rules apply as what we talked about earlier. You want to press, you don't want to iron. Very, very important. We were all taught by our moms to, to iron. But with this, you press, lift, press, lift, press. The second rule is you never touch the iron directly to the stabilizer like I was just doing. You always want to have a pressing cloth. The Floriani pressing cloth is designed to be used with this stabilizer. So please use your Floriani pressing cloth between your iron and your stabilizer, or I want you to press from the fabric side. Either way is totally acceptable. Next, your temperature of your iron, low. I want you using like a wool to a high silk or a low wool setting on your iron. If you go higher than that, if you accidentally iron in at a linen setting, you may turn the temporary fusible into a semi-permanent fusible. So we don't want that. If that should happen, just so you will know, reheat the stabilizer and pull it away. So by reheating the fusible crystals, you reactivate them so you can pull them away. So there's a little tip there. Last but not least, make sure that the piece you are fusing on is at least 1 inch bigger than your hoop size. This is a great example of your hoop size. You want it at least 1 inch bigger all the way around. That gridlocks it. Now, if you are sticking down the piece, that's not so important, but the way I have it here hooped, very important. If you don't use a piece larger than your hoop size, you've defeated the purpose of using it, because the knit will definitely stretch out of shape when you hoop it, okay? So, got a little sample here. Some people ask me, why all the different colors? The beauty of no-show mesh is that it does not shadow through. So if you are embroidering like on a white tennis shirt or golf shirt or t-shirt, my recommendation to you is to use the beige color. The beige color blends in with most skin types, and that's what I did here on this little baby onesie. You can see that that is beige, and the great thing is that once it's on your skin, you do not see it at all. Now, if I'm embroidering on a dark fabric like black or dark brown, or even royal color fabrics like navy or royal blue or red, I will generally switch and use our black color. Okay, so this is also very popular. And then we have the off-white, which is also very popular. So all of these, again, 3 colors, and they're all fusible or non-fusible. So 1 layer of our no-show nylon mesh is capable of supporting about 8,000 stitches. So 8,000 stitches could be something small. If you're trying to do something very intense in the embroidery, then I'm going to recommend that you use 2 layers of our fusible mesh. And the way you do that is cross-laying them. If you look closely, and I'm going to hold this so the camera can see it, you will see that there is an embossing pattern on the mesh. Very, very important, and the embossing pattern gives strength to the stabilizer, but I want to really show, I'm going to move these out of the way so I can get an up close here. You can see that I cross-laid these at a 90-degree, at a 45-degree angle, not 90. That's very important. So the embossing pattern runs 90 degrees off the roll. I'm going to take a second piece and I'm going to cross-lay that at 45 degrees, and that starts my stitch protection up to 20,000 stitches. That's a substantial jump in what it will allow me to stitch into this piece of fabric. So that gives me lots of really great strength there to hoop. So 1 layer, about 8,000 stitches, 2 layers cross-laid at that magic 45-degree angle, and you're going to jump up to about 20,000 stitches in what it will protect. So again, I have fused both of those on. Then you're going to hoop. Very important with all of your knit fabrics that you want to use one of our toppings, either the water soluble or the heat removable, and we're going to learn a lot about those as well. So we get our topping in place, and then If you feel that your design is intense, or maybe it's poorly digitized, or maybe it's a big monogram with lots of space in between, those are problem areas. If I have any doubt about the design whatsoever, what am I going to do? I'm going to take an extra piece of stabilizer, which I recommend either our Stitch and Wash or our Tearaway medium, either way. And then remember, this is going to float. I'm just using the same hoop that I've used throughout this entire video. You are going to float that extra piece right under the hoop for that added support. Very, very important that gives the design the fibers that it needs to stitch correctly in the fabric. Because remember, when you fuse your stabilizer onto the back of the fabric, you're taking care of the fabric primarily. Now, by floating, I start thinking about the design. What does the design need to not stress out this fabric? So very, very important that we float if we're in doubt, to give some extra fiber count there, okay? And it's only okay to use a tearaway as a floater when you're dealing in knits and unstable fabrics, okay? So again, you always want to use a cutaway on knits, but it's okay to float a tearaway for extra fiber count within the design. All right, so I hope that's clear. So, all right, moving on, I want to talk about the non-fusible counterpart to the mesh. So as I said, we have the three colors, and we have fusible and non-fusible. Well, we're so in love with the fusible, or at least I hope you are, since learning about all these wonderful stabilizers. Why would we need a non-fusible? Well, I'm going to give you some magic here. You're not going to believe how awesome this is. Have you ever been given something to embroider by a friend of yours or a relative that says, oh, you can do this, no problem, and it's like a sweater or something that you're scared to death to embroider that particular type of fabric? I have. I've been given a lot of things and I'm going, oh no, how am I going to stitch this and not mess it up? I'm going to give you just the most awesome way to do this. It's just so easy, and I call it stress-free embroidery. It's absolutely amazing. I love this. Look at this design. This is big. This is intense. This is a gorgeous design. This is one of our Jenny Haskins collections. I love this embroidery. It's so rewarding to stitch out Jenny Haskins collections. They're absolutely gorgeous. But on a sweater knit, and this is a very nice sweater. And so I'm struggling with how to get this to lay and how to stitch correctly in a sweater knit. So I'm going to show you how easy this is. All you do, and this is a great way to use the black. I love it for this technique. I actually hoop the mesh, the non-fusible, by itself, and I'll take 2 layers and hoop it together. And I will stitch my embroidery design directly onto the mesh. Once the embroidery is finished, I leave it in the hoop, and then I take it to a piece of glass, a cookie sheet, a tile, anything that is a surface that can be burned. And then I use our heat craft tool. I love this little thing. It's the perfect temperature, and what it does is it burns away the mesh. Now, I've been using a key word here, nylon. Our Floriani no-show nylon mesh is nylon. It's not a polyester. It's not a poly mesh. So this is a very important ingredient that we use, because when you go to burn away the edges of your embroidery, you just created a freestanding embroidery design. Now this can be stitched down with invisible thread right onto this garment. I mean, again, this is a sweater knit, so I love that every bit of this is appliqued on. Did not embroider it directly onto the sweater, so wow, that took a lot of stress off. Or if you're trying to get embroidery into an area that's difficult, I love it for that. This little table runner is also a super nice example of where I would use this. Every one of these flowers are all stitched in place by applique. I did that with that exact technique that I just showed you. This lampshade, which is kind of sitting over here to the side, same way, just embroidery and then glued the flowers on. Isn't that gorgeous? And simple. I love this for luggage, backpacks, anything like that that you need to get some embroidery into. That's a really fun way to stitch, and again, it takes the stress off. Embroider it and then applique it. That is fantastic. So real quickly before we leave the mesh, one of the things that I wanted to share with you that I love is this little, I call it a hack. For those of us that still sew, a lot of times we go back to our old pattern pieces. Any scraps of the mesh that you may have, the fusible mesh, don't throw them away. I use them to back my pattern pieces. I will actually iron them on to the back of my pattern pieces. So that does a couple of things. It preserves the pattern piece, number one, but number two, it also keeps it from sliding and shifting on the fabric so you don't have to do as much pinning. So that's a really fun little technique there.